Hello and welcome to another episode of Taking Back Saturday, a Happy Buyers Club podcast where we break down the real estate market each and every Friday and help home buyers build confidence, follow a process and hopefully buy really happy. You'd think I would get more comfortable saying that after doing it a few times back to back with Chase on paternity leave, but here I am still on my uncomfortable side of the desk, but I have been wanting to have this conversation for a long time. Today, we have a man who I think everyone in the industry respects and someone who actually is on my own list if I ever want to sell my home. He's the auction king, and that's pretty much what we're going to talk about a lot today. Shane Hicks, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
It's good to have you here. Easy question to start. Why auctions?
Why auction? I'm a very process-driven person. So when I came into the industry, I thought it was kind of a bit all over the place. There was no real clear parameters on how things got sold. So I then had the lucky break, I suppose, to work with Sarah and Damien Hackett for a while Sarah went on maternity leave, and they were very much auction process. And I looked at that and I went, this is fantastic. So I just adopted that. I just believe that we... if you list the home with very clear instructions on how you're selling it, you explain that to the seller, you explain that to the buyer, then everybody knows where they stand, and then you get on with the process.
If that's the reality, why do so many people fear it? Sellers and buyers.
Sellers and buyers. Okay. I think they don't understand it, really, because the process is quite simple and should be quite simple. Sellers always have this fear of exposing themselves of the stress that it may cause, and what if nobody turns up to the auction. That's what sellers will say. I would say to them that if you start a campaign to sell your property without any sort of guideline or deadline, then it's like jumping in the car saying, I'm going for a drive, but I've got no idea where I'm going, as opposed to putting something in the sat-nav and just following it. So and I would also say the stress involved with not having a deadline and then getting an offer, which may be good, and then sitting around waiting for the valuer to come and agree with the price, waiting for the buyers, building and pest inspector, who's literally going out there to try and find problems to get a discount. Dealing with that stress is much greater than dealing with a nice clean process where you're in the driver's seat. So that's from a seller's point of view. I think buyers have watched and seen the media where there's an amazing auction that goes $200,000 over the reserve, and they're worried about that.
Yeah.
But I say to them, like, okay, yes, that happens, but it's not the norm. The auction process typically works out fair market value. And there are some exceptions either way, as there are with the private treaty process. But if I was a buyer in the market we're in, I would much rather be buying at auction than I would as a private treaty. You and I both know, and I'm sure you deal with it all the time. You put in an offer. What happens that night? You get home and, guess what?
There's another one.
There's two other offers. But I can't tell you what the other offers are. Yeah. You just have to increase your offer. As opposed to the transparent situation of standing in a driveway, watching what's going on around you, watching what everybody else is doing. And again, you're in control. So I'm going to summarise that. I believe the auction process puts the seller in control of their destiny and the buyer in control of their destiny.
Okay, very good. There's a lot of people who listen to this who will go, we don't like auctions, almost to the point of not even going to an open home because of it. How do they get over that fear? How do you help them get over that fear?
I'd probably explain that bit of a story about the transparency of it all, and explain where we're there to help them. Look, there are some people that won't get over that, but I don't believe it's just not as scary as they think it is. And when they go, I can tell you what's happening at the moment is exactly the opposite. Okay, so I'm meeting lots of buyers that have missed out on 2 or 3 properties, and they come to me and they say, Shane, thank God your property's going to auction. I just want a fair chance to buy it. Now that is happening more and more every day. And as you know, we don't sell before auction either, Sam. So they again sometimes thank me for that process. We can talk about that if you like.
Yeah. I had a lady from Harcourts on the north side, Chanel Yigbash, on this show earlier, and she's the same. She auctions everything, doesn't sell prior. And she was like, we don't need auctions used to be about competition. That's not necessary in this market. It is now about transparency. It's a lot easier to manage 6 to 12 bidders on the day and get them ready than it is to manage 12 offers behind the scenes, because then you're just the arsehole for 11 people. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I can see it for that respect. And we always say to our clients, and we've said plenty of times on this show, that our favourite way to buy a house is a one-to-one negotiation, ideally with a sales agent in the middle as well, because then everybody has someone to talk to and you can empathise and you can hash it all out, and then you can go back and feel like you're making good decisions. The next best way to buy is at auction.
Yes.
Because you know where everyone stands.
Yes.
And ideally you've just got to be prepared so that you're not panicking and freaking out or making what doesn't feel like confident decisions on the day. So with that in mind, how do you advise people to prepare for auction to give them every success at buying confidently, calmly, and not being that calculated couple that pulls out their phone and goes, "Fuck, can we make this work?"
Yeah. Okay, so firstly, we like to provide as much information as possible to the buyer, and that we will always give some comparable sales. I hear people complain all the time that they can't get a guide for an auction. That is incorrect. I can give you a guide on every single property. I will say I've got comparable sales between X and Y. The owner has approved those, and we're expecting the property to sit somewhere there. But you make up your own mind. So we give them a guide. We give them the building and pest inspection. We give them the school catchment. There's a list of other property reports we give them that mean that they're very informed. We then really, as they register, we go through a process of really coaching them on what to do on the day. First question we ask is, have you bid at auction before? Majority say no. Have you got a strategy for the day? Most people say no. And then we go through and explain the best way that we see for them to get that property, which is, if you're at the auction, is to be organised, be confident, stand, look, dress like you're confident, where you can see the auctioneer, and get in and participate. Because it really is, particularly in the market we're in, it's not you against the vendor, it's you against the other bidders. So if you can, you just got to outbid the other bidders, or be confident enough that they give up.
Do you guys do auction strategy meetings with your buyers?
Not so much. It's more of it's just pretty much that process I just went through with you, and that can be, with some buyers, that's literally a 5-minute conversation at their last inspection, or it could be, could even be on auction day if we haven't had a chance to get to have that conversation with them. So somewhere along the line, we'll have. And then look, if people say to them, "I bid at 10 auctions before and I've got a strategy," we leave them in peace. It's not our job, but a lot of people haven't. So, and they appreciate it, and I've helped many people find their home by giving them that advice, and they've thanked me afterwards. Yeah.
Aside from maybe not having those conversations about what they're willing to spend and where they're willing to go to before the day, is there anything else that you see a lot of buyers might get wrong for their first auction, or more than their first?
Oh, look, pretty much. I think if I see them do something wrong as a buyer, is they stand there and they just don't participate at all, and they get left out. And look, the hardest bid is your first one. It really is. If you can get your first, I see it all the time, like the first one, it's their hands are shaking, they're sweating, they get their first bid in, they go, "Well, that was okay." And they can really get in. So if they can get in early, whereas at the end, when they're probably at the top end, it's much harder to make your first bid when you know your funds are nearly exhausted. So that's what I see them sit back, and at the end they go, "Oh, I probably would have paid that, but I just didn't get a chance to bid, and I was just not confident." So it's holding back that stops them buying the property. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
And sometimes they've got someone there giving them advice as well, which can go either way, as you and I both know. So careful of advice.
Yeah. If you want to buy the property, give it your best shot.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Not every auction goes gangbusters and goes 200 grand over reserve.
Yeah.
Some of them do go a bit slower, and there's cause for pause, and everybody sort of retreats to their own corner of whether it's the driveway or a couple of bedrooms inside.
Yep.
At a Shane Hicks auction, what happens behind closed doors if an auction pauses and you start negotiating between parties?
Okay, yes. And that's reality of an auction. We'd love them all to sail through and bang, gone. But reality is sometimes you do pause. So at that particular point of time, as you know, work very closely with Antonio and Andre, is that we would, and our auctioneer, we would literally all just come together, have a bit of a chat, and we would go, this buyer is in this situation, this buyer's here, can you, and then we will basically split up and have a chat to the buyers that have been participating in the auction. We'll literally say to them at that point of time, you've come here to buy the property. It's simply not for sale at the price it's at right now. However, and this is we actually share the reserve with them. The reserve today is what it is. So you're here, the seller's here. If you can increase your offer, I'll go back and talk to the seller and I'll see if I can get it for you. Because some people, of course we're working for the seller, but last time I looked, you need a buyer and a seller to get a transaction. So we're also there to help the buyer buy. And when we say you can't buy at that price, but you can buy at this price, our job is to try and bridge that gap.
And I guess the difference there as well is it's not behind the scenes. You know the price at which it's going to... Everyone, I think, when they are in those best and finals or even a private negotiation, they're desperate for a counteroffer. Yes. And that's a really rare thing. A reserve price at a pause in an auction is effectively a counteroffer.
It is. And look, as I said, we're there to achieve a sale. And I explained to our sellers that that's what we'll be doing. I go into great depth with our sellers on that process and why we do it. But that's what's one of the things that gives us such a high clearance rate is again, trying to be as transparent as possible.
And for anyone who's listening to this who's thinking about selling their house, whether it's by auction or otherwise, how does it go on the seller's side of things when maybe their worst fear, if you call it that inverted commas, of there not being a runaway auction is happening and they're kind of watching it from the bedroom window through the curtains as everybody is? Yeah. How do you manage those emotions?
I make sure that they're briefed very well beforehand, so no surprises on the day. So you talked about the seller's meeting. I spend an hour with the seller the week leading into the auction and go through all the buyers and where they're at as far as their status, if they need longer settlements, shorter deposits. We go through all of that. We get all those variation to auction terms approved. But I also go through the reality of there's 4 scenarios on the day, A, B, C, D. A being organic, where it just sails all the way through, and of course we love that. B being negotiated, where literally it's the example I just gave, where it gets to a certain point where we do need to close down and have a negotiation. Look, C is set for sale, is that when you're in the B mode and you don't bridge that gap. And I explain that can be a reality as well, because although we sell most of them, we don't sell them all. And if it's set for sale, we remain very confident with the seller. We will always announce on the day that we're now available at offers over a certain price. We do that because we want to show that, again, the transparency to the people that are there. There could be someone in the crowd who does need finance, who didn't think they could afford it, and then we put a price on it. And look, I would say the majority of the time we sell it within 2 weeks thereafter. Scenario D, and I do go through that, is sometimes there are no bidders. Now, it doesn't happen a lot in the market we're in, but it's still probably 5% of the time it happens, and I'd rather explain that to the seller that it could happen. I usually know whether it's going to happen, but they're the scenarios I go through. So I think I'd like to say that our sellers are very prepared for whatever happens, and I finish the conversation by saying, you see, whatever happens, you can see we've got a plan. And they nod their head just like you did. And it's true. We've got a plan. We never panic. We never... it's just next part of the process.
No alarms, no surprises.
No, that's exactly right.
A lot of people walk away from an auction that passes in, particularly neighbours, and they'll sort of snigger, be like, oh, they failed to sell. Is an auction passing in a failure?
It's not. Look, it's nowhere near as much fun. Yeah. We love getting them sold. But you've tested the market on that day, and if the seller chooses not to sell at that price, then look, that's their right. That they have a right to sell at a price that suits them. So I believe it would have tested the market on the day. If they're not happy with that, we then need to move on and test the market with a price. Usually by then, at least the seller is probably more aware of where the market is at. So when they're putting a price on it, it's no longer such a guess. They're putting a price on it that's more educated, if you like.
And again, you're giving to buyers transparency because it's not price by negotiation for 4 weeks where they're all wondering what's going on. It's This is our expectation, meet it or choose another house.
Correct.
Okay, very good. You don't sell houses prior to auction, right? And actually, I love that about working with you guys because we can just put a date in our diary. If it hits the market or if we've seen it early, we know that we're not buying it early. It is what it is. And it gives us time to decide if we like it. And if we do, it gives us time to figure out what is it worth to us, right? So there are plenty of properties out there every week that are listed for auction on a Tuesday and are sold by the following Monday. Why do some properties sell prior?
Yeah. Look, we launched one in Holland Park on the weekend. I could have sold it 5 times on Saturday. Of course we didn't. For a few reasons. Well, can I explain why we don't first?
Yeah.
And then I'll explain why people do. So, firstly, again, in the interest of transparency and the interest of honesty, I think if you explain that the property is on the market and selling on a particular day, and then if you stick to that, buyers trust us. Mm-hmm. They absolutely, just like you do, like you trust us because that is the thing. The moment you start, this is what we're doing, and all of a sudden, we're taking offers, and then bang, it's sold. I believe that buyer looks at you and go, well, you told me it was going to auction. All of a sudden it's sold. I would have bought it and I would have paid more. Then they're cranky at you. And it's just, again, very transparent, very honest, open policy of sticking to that. And sometimes they look at it on the second weekend, they go, I really, really want to buy it. And I said, well, luckily we weren't taking offers. Otherwise we would have sold it last weekend. So luckily for you, we're selling next Saturday. And I believe also from the buyer, I believe they know exactly where they stand. The seller, it gives them time to expose it to enough people. Again, when I see a property sell, and then they put up, sold within 2 days.
Undersold within 2 days.
Yeah, I can't help but think, well, what if the rest of the market saw it?
Yeah.
If it sold that easily, what if you exposed it to people over a 3-week process and let the market really push it? Because if it was going to sell, then it probably would have sold for more. For a seller's point of view, it gives them time to read the market, understand where the buyers are at, and be confident. The old thing, don't die wondering what the property was worth. They will see that the competition has got the property to a certain price. Probably I get a little repetitive about transparency and honesty and process because that's what we like, and that's what I believe. We have a good following of sellers and buyers that like to both sell and buy from us because of that process.
Very good. And why do you reckon some people do pull them early?
Honestly, I think the agent is scared of the process, and they're I've got someone who wants to buy it now, so maybe I'll just sell it now. It's not hard to talk a seller into taking an early offer. It really, if it's in the right zone. But I think the agent should do their job and take the property through to the process that they started.
Very good. We will always advise our clients that if something is going to sell prior, it's usually for one of two reasons. There's no interest and someone's made an offer and the agent just goes, we've got to take this.
Yep. Or
there is interest so far above logic that no one else will compete and they're worried that actually the transparency could be a bad thing for their sellers.
Yes.
There's never any fair market value that gets done before the day, in my opinion, at least.
Yes. And we have had many times, there's some times where you think, well, we had a couple on the weekend where we had no one registered before the day. And all of a sudden you've got, you end up with 4 people there, 2 of which have only seen the property that day. One of our biggest sales this year, 3.91 million in Camp Hill.
That was ridiculous, that auction.
The buyer had never stepped foot in the property before that day. Now, we could have sold it that week for less than that, and the seller would have been happy, and everyone would have went, wow, what a great job you did. but we actually took it through to the process and delivered a result he was ecstatic with.
Very good. Right, I'll get you out of here. One more question.
Okay.
What is your one tip for someone who wants to buy at auction this weekend?
Yeah, do your research. Be organised. Ask the agent, is there any particular terms that the seller would like better? If you're flexible with your terms, if the seller would like 45 days or 60 days or whatever it is, just say, well, I'm happy to give that. Like, get yourself really knowledgeable about the situation and then show up, be confident, get in and bid. You cannot buy the property if you don't bid. So, and remember what I said earlier, it's you against the other bidders, it's not you against the seller. So get in there and be confident and see if you can get yourself a house.
Shane Hicks, thank you very much.